I got the notice.
Should I let people in?
Yeah.
Okay, Councilmember Hillis is here as well. So.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. We're going to give folks a couple minutes to get settled and get logged in. So just bear with us a couple minutes while we allow folks to get settled. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're going to wait just another minute or two to allow folks to get settled in, get logged on. So we'll get started in just a moment. Nate, why don't we wait just like one more minute and then go ahead and get started?
Sounds good. There's not anyone in the waiting room. It's been kind of quiet in the waiting room.
Okay. All right,
All right.
I'm showing 6:04. Let's go ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you, everyone. I'm Nate Hosel. I'm a city planner with the Department of City Planning with the City of Atlanta. This is a public meeting for a freight study in Northwest Atlanta in the industrial districts and neighborhoods surrounding the industrial districts from Armour Yards over to the river north of I-20. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We have a presentation, kind of give you a high level of what we've been doing for the past 14 months during this planning process. Show some big ideas that we heard from the community and the stakeholders that we have been communicating with over the past several months during our public engagement. And, letting everyone know that these draft documents are on our project website, and you can have more opportunities to take a look more in depth over the next couple of weeks. This project is funded by the Atlanta Regional Commission in partnership with Invest Atlanta and Councilmember Hillis' office in District 9. In fact, Dustin Hillis has joined with us today, as well as our Commissioner for Department of City Planning. So before I introduce or let the consultant team run through the presentation, I'd like to have both the Councilmember Hillis provide some introductory remarks. Then if my commissioner wishes to speak too, please feel free to do so, Commissioner Prince. Councilmember Hillis, are you able to talk? He might not be ready to talk yet. Commissioner Prince, do you have any intro remarks?
I'm looking forward to the presentation. I can't wait to see it.
Great, thanks. And many of you we've met along the way, both in virtual meetings and in person. So thank you for participating again tonight. Small group. Aaron, do you want to go through? And then if Councilmember Hillis ever wants to just chime in, he can feel free to do so. And
Yes.
that goes for anyone too. Please, if you have questions, raise your hand, put something in the chat. It's a small group, so this should be pretty interactive. And we all know how to use our Zoom meetings at this point, I think, too. So, Aaron, go ahead.
Great. Just in case, I did want to kind of point out a couple of tips on using Zoom. We are going to try to keep this somewhat interactive and hopefully save some time for questions and answers toward the end of the presentation. Give you all a chance to share your thoughts and feedback with us and ask us questions. So when the time comes, if you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat panel, or as we get closer toward the end of the presentation, if you want to raise your hand using the reactions, you can do that, and then we can have you unmute and ask your question, and we can kind of engage in dialogue that way. So either option works for us, and we'll let you know when, we'll try to address the questions as they come in, and then there'll be some time, like I said, set aside at the end. So with that, I should introduce myself. I'm Erin Thorson. I am a senior transportation planner with a company called Gresham Smith. We were hired by the Department of City Planning alongside two of our teaming partners, SB Friedman Development Advisors and Alliance Strategies, to conduct this freight study, as Nate mentioned, which is funded by the Atlanta Regional Commission, Invest Atlanta, and Councilmember Dustin Hillis. And the purpose of tonight's meeting is really, as Nate said, to kind of give an overview of the study itself, the work that we've been doing over the last 14 months, and primarily to share some of our big ideas with you all as far as what is in the draft recommendations and what is in the draft plan itself. So hopefully some of this will be new to some of you, and for some that have participated alongside us along the way over the last year, some of this will be pretty familiar to you. Excuse me. I did want to also mention that this meeting is being recorded. Hopefully you saw that when you entered the meeting. We'll make sure that we have a recording of the meeting available, and it will also help us kind of capture any comments and questions that you all do ask along the way. And then lastly, I just want to mention that, we are in kind of the draft recommendations stage of this plan and process. And so the information that is presented here tonight is kind of a snapshot of a point in time where we are today. And some of this may, change and evolve over the next couple of weeks as we move through kind of responding to comments and making revisions based on the feedback that we get. So with that, this is our planning study area. Nate briefly described it earlier, kind of from the ARMOUR-OTTLEY Industrial District and the Lindbergh area over to the Chattahoochee River, and then north of I-20, really north of Joseph E. Boone. And this area was identified as a freight cluster when the Atlanta Regional Commission did their regional freight plan update back in 2016. And that's what this map here on the right-hand side shows. So you can kind of see right at the heart of this industrial area with Norfolk Southern in Minyard and the Chattahoochee Industrial District, the Atlanta Industrial Park, and others. So at that time, they identified the need to kind of do a more localized study and really focus in on some of the needs and issues in this particular part of Northwest Atlanta. And as with all of the planning processes going on in the city of Atlanta right now, we want to just kind of take a step back and look at where we've come from and kind of what the guiding documents are and sort of how they relate to Atlanta City Design, which is the city's visionary document guiding growth and development for the long-term future of the city. So all of these other planning efforts and studies kind of, follow on to that and are really putting forward different strategies for how to kind of grow and develop in the spirit of that vision. And Freight ATL is just one of those many plans, and it will help focus on specific strategies within Northwest Atlanta, informing policies and potential infrastructure projects in the future. All of this kind of, working in concert with these other foundational documents related to transportation, comprehensive planning, economic development, and resiliency. Over the course of the last year, we have been engaged in a number of different activities and tasks. We kind of kicked off last January and have really gone through a process of research and analysis and data collection, case studies, looking at traffic operations and transportation within Northwest Atlanta, and then moving into kind of developing recommendations based on the needs and the issues that we've observed through our process. We've also done quite a bit of stakeholder engagement and community outreach over the course of the last year. We have a study advisory committee that we've worked with that consists of some representatives from different agencies and organizations throughout Northwest Atlanta, along with the Atlanta Regional Commission, Georgia Department of Transportation, ATL DOT, Upper West Side CID, I know has been very involved as well. We've got Piedmont Heights well represented as well. So a number of folks have participated in that and kind of guided us along the way through this process. We also conducted a number of insight sessions, kind of small focus group types of conversations with industry representatives and community members, neighborhood representatives. We did some walking tours in different areas throughout the study area, looking at specific issues on the ground, kind of observing firsthand, what it feels like to be a pedestrian in those areas, what happens when, freight vehicles are moving through the area, really kind of understanding from that firsthand perspective. And then we've had some online engagement as well. We have our STORYMAP and our project website, and we've had a couple of public-facing presentations, some pop-up events as well. So it's been a busy 12 to 14 months, and we're really glad that you all have supported us along the way. So thank you. Here's just a couple of images from some of our various activities. You can kind of see our team out in the field. Some of the folks in these photos may even be on the call today, but we did kind of a combination of in-person and virtual. Really felt it was important to get out and experience conditions on the ground with neighborhood representatives and people who live and work in these areas day in and day out. I mentioned earlier the online story map. This is a really fun kind of way to engage with the plan and learn a little bit more about the work that we've done. You can go to freightatl.com and view the story map through that website. There's a link under the Get Involved tab. And it really kind of walks you through the process. You know, what is this plan about? What is the study doing? Why is it important to study freight in Atlanta? And it now features some draft recommendations and an interesting section on the history of freight in Atlanta, which I encourage you to go check out and take a look at. There's some really interesting write-ups there and some great photos from all different eras. So feel free to go and explore those maps, take a closer look at the resources that are there. And I wanted to just kind of take a step back and say, you know, we've heard a lot from different community members and stakeholders along the way over the last year. And there are several kind of key themes that really resonated with us that we heard over and over again. Some of it has to do with driver behavior and the combination of the size and weight of freight vehicles, narrow travel lanes, kind of the lack of separation between sidewalks and vehicle lanes. And that really makes it, you know, uncomfortable or feels unsafe for people who might be walking or biking in these areas. You can see some examples of some of the, you know, missing sidewalk or, you know, lack of buffer space between vehicles and sidewalks in the photos. And we heard a lot about trucks disrupting or damaging residential areas, even in some cases where there may be a local ordinance that prohibits truck traffic on those roads. And there's a variety of you know, reasons for that, but that was definitely something that we've heard about over the course of the study. And then just some of the outdated infrastructure or the you know, evolving size of vehicles and the design of these vehicles, you know, might not fit some of the older infrastructure. There's some weight restrictions and low clearance bridges and, you know, tight turning corners and radii that make it difficult for trucks to navigate through a specific area without driving over the curb. There's a lot more that we heard too, but these were some of the themes that really kind of stuck out with us. And so we hope that you'll see in some of the recommendations that, you know, we've tried to address a number of these things through some of the design projects and the other types of recommendations that are offered in the plan. I mentioned kind of our process. This slide really just encapsulates some of the key tasks that we've done over the course of the last year. Everything from reviewing best practices from other communities and looking at what other cities have done when it comes to health and safety around industrial areas, the impact of e-commerce, and even freight planning practices. How are other communities doing engagement when it comes to freight projects? We also inventoried existing conditions and kind of assessed the needs of the transportation network throughout the study area, looked at what projects have been identified, what the current travel patterns are, land use, looked at really a variety of topics. We also had partners on our team that really took a deep dive into the industrial development and jobs side of things. So thinking about the economic value of industrial businesses in Northwest Atlanta, the jobs they provide, how they contribute to the overall economy. There's manufacturers, there's distributors, there's you know, all kinds of different businesses that really kind of help the economy keep running. And so that report talks a little bit more about the trends and what they've seen in terms of the high impact clusters within Northwest Atlanta. And then lastly, we did a more detailed traffic study, really diving into the safety and operations at 14 different intersections throughout the study area to help kind of inform our recommendations. So as we have been developing recommendations and kind of going through this process, I think it's important to recognize that it's an iterative process, and it kind of starts with identifying these needs, understanding what has already been approved and programmed, what projects are funded. We brainstormed with our team and with the stakeholders and our advisory committee about different ideas for possible projects, came up with some draft recommendations. We've kind of gone back and forth and talked a little bit about how to evolve and refine those. And then we're here now at this point where we're presenting kind of our draft plan and draft recommendations. So it's really been taking all that input and trying to, you know, distill it down into a concrete list of some projects and strategies going forward. Some of the things that we took into consideration along the way are, you know, those findings from the technical analysis, a safety analysis looking at crash patterns throughout the study area, the observations from our field visits and our engagement activities, talking with community members, and really understanding what's already been done in terms of other projects and recommendations, notably through projects associated with ATL DOT, Georgia DOT, Beltline, Path Foundation, Upper West Side CID, and many, many more. So at the end of the day, we've kind of landed on two broad themes or categories of types of recommendations within the plan. There's more capital projects, and those are kind of your infrastructure projects and your studies. And then there's policies and strategies. So within the broad category of capital projects, we've identified intersection improvements, corridor improvements, bridge and railroad crossing improvements, some transportation technology improvements, and workforce access and multimodal improvements. So sidewalk and bus stop upgrades, as well as a couple of studies to take a closer look at certain areas that might need just a little bit more of a detailed analysis or a holistic look at what should really happen within those areas. Under the policies and strategies, there's kind of two subcategories. One is focused on industrial development, jobs, and land use. So those include strategies related to supporting, attracting, and retaining industrial businesses, mitigating land use conflicts, and understanding how to support businesses and strengthening access to jobs for people that live in the study area or the surrounding areas. And then we also have transportation and planning related policies and strategies that focus on coordination among and across different projects, ensuring that there's coordination between the city and other regional partners as future plans are implemented and planning documents are updated. We also are looking at recommendations to the city's designated truck route network, improving infrastructure so that businesses and other users and people, neighborhoods and communities can all coexist. And then also some signage and wayfinding strategies as well. To kind of arrive at the draft plan itself, our team worked with the Study Advisory Committee and Department of City Planning to develop a framework for how we evaluate and kind of prioritize relative priorities within all of these different category types. So we took into consideration safety and mobility, how ready a project is to move forward, how complex it is, whether it aligns with identified funding sources and capital infrastructure investments that have already been identified, improvements to connectivity, access to multimodal facilities, improving truck route access, equity and community support, thinking about the degree to which projects support access to employment, and then also thinking about environmental impact and what these projects might do in terms of emissions and providing alternative ways of traveling around. So all of these were different inputs that we kind of took into a scoring matrix that helped us kind of identify both quantitative and qualitative measures to try to prioritize these projects, relatively speaking, and think about what makes sense in the short term versus what makes sense in the long term for the city to consider. So at the end of the day, we landed on kind of two different subsets of project recommendations. One is a short-term action plan, and that's kind of focused on the first 10 years. And then the other is a long-term action plan, which is more beyond that 10-year time frame. This is something that the Atlanta Regional Commission kind of asks project teams that are working on these freight cluster plans to do, so that there are some financially feasible projects that can get off the ground within the first 10 years. So we took those projects and broke them down into the higher priority and sort of more medium priority based on projections of estimated funding and future grant revenue and what we think would make sense in terms of that prioritization process and what would be the benefits. And then in any of the projects that we didn't think would be able to be funded kind of within that first 10-year timeframe are part of a long-term vision plan. But at the end of the day, it's important to note that this is all kind of a relative priority, and we wanted to create a flexible roadmap rather than a prescription for the city. So at the end of the day, it is able to be shifted around and moved as priorities shift, as new funding comes down the line, as other projects are moved forward. It might make sense to advance a different project in order to kind of keep things moving. So it's not meant to be a rank ordered, list of projects, but rather kind of some suggestions about higher versus lower priority. So in the short-term projects, we've got a range of different intersection improvements and corridor improvements. We've got some workforce access improvements. So those really focus on sidewalk and bus stop improvements along transit routes that serve industrial districts and provide access to jobs. And they're kind of spread throughout the study area. I wanted to give a couple of examples of some of those particular types of projects. These are just a couple snapshots of what you would maybe see in the report itself if you take a closer look. This is an example of an intersection improvement at Marietta Boulevard and Bolton Road that would install additional right turn lanes to improve safety and operations through this intersection. It also would include additional signage to provide advance warning to drivers that there are traffic signals ahead if they're maybe unable to see them as they approach the intersection through curves in the road. And then installing additional signage, particularly to direct people to I-285, which is the official truck bypass around Atlanta, as well as, for drivers that may not be familiar with the area, just helping them better navigate through that area so that they're staying on the designated truck routes and not necessarily, using roads where they're not supposed to be. So there's a couple of different components of that, but that's kind of an example of one possible intersection improvement that is recommended. We're also looking at a couple of corridor improvements throughout the study area that really aim to kind of try to strike a balance between the need for freight vehicles and transit vehicles alongside people walking and biking, and recognize that these are areas where you do still have industrial businesses and there will be trucks traveling through. And so how can we kind of provide a safer environment for everybody? So in this particular case, we're looking at kind of providing one travel lane in each direction with a center turn lane that allows people to move out of the through lane in order to make that left turn, which helps reduce the likelihood of crashes. By reducing the number of lanes, it makes it safer for pedestrians to get across the road. Also could allow for median refuge islands or raised islands where pedestrians are able to cross between signalized intersections. So kind of overall, this is a recommendation that helps to kind of balance safety and mobility needs along some of these key corridors. So there's a couple of similar types of projects recommended. In the short term second tier, we have a handful of those corridor types of improvements along longer segments of roadway, some workforce access and multimodal improvements, along with a couple of studies and some technology projects as well. And you can kind of see those are spread throughout the study area here, as represented by the red shades for the corridor and intersection improvements, and then that blue color for the sidewalk and bus stop improvements. As an example of one of the studies, we have here a recommendation for kind of a more comprehensive or cohesive, look at the ARMOUR-OTTLEY district and understanding travel patterns a little bit better, and making some recommendations about how to kind of streamline turning movements. I know there's some active work underway to address some of the drainage issues at the entrance to the district, where I know that the city is putting in some resources to try to come up with some solutions kind of in the short term. And this project maybe could build on that and really help try to, better accommodate all modes of travel in this area in a holistic manner that is, sensitive to the needs of the businesses within the district. We also are looking at some multimodal improvements along Parrott Avenue, particularly in this area as it lies fairly close to the Chattahoochee brick site. We anticipate seeing an increase of different modes of travel in the area as we see the increases of new trail projects coming through the area and potential future connections to the Chattahoochee Riverlands, which is not far from this area. We wanted to use this as an opportunity to not only improve mobility for the freight vehicles along this road, but think about how we can better accommodate pedestrians and bicyclists, improve the at-grade railroad crossing, and evaluate some of the intersection geometry issues at kind of that eastern intersection between Bolton and Parrott over here. We do have a separate project that is looking at intersection improvements specifically at the signalized intersection here on the western end of Bolton and Parrott there. And in the long-term vision plan, there's, again, a combination of different project types, including some bridge and railroad projects, some additional intersection improvements, some workforce access and multimodal improvements, along with some possible technology improvements, looking at grade railroad crossings and some signage. So those are kind of just a few snapshots of a couple of the types of projects that you'll see if you take a closer look at the report. I did want to spend a little bit of time talking about some recommended changes to city designated truck routes. So there's several different kind of actions and strategies that are recommended as part of the plan, looking at removing some segments from city designated truck route network that may no longer be needed based on our team's analysis of recent legislation, overall truck route connectivity, changing land uses, thinking about access to destinations and connections to interstate highways, and making sure that those routes kind of make sense and that there's overall connectivity. So kind of based on these different factors and considerations, there are several segments of roads that are currently part of the city's truck route network that we are recommending be considered for removal. And those are shown in a map in the plan. It's also right here on the screen. Those are the segments shown in this blue color here. So particularly kind of in the Upper West Side area, we've got Ellsworth Industrial Boulevard, Huff Road, Howell Mill Road, and a couple of smaller segments, Elaine Ave, Jefferson Street, and portion of Collier Road. And we think that, based on all of the changing land uses and the future development and the mixing of different modes of travel in these areas, it would still provide an overall well-connected truck route network that gives vehicles access to these industrial districts and the key destinations that they need to reach, but also, kind of streamlines those movements and limits it to some of the roads in the area. There are also a couple of potential future changes that might be associated with this. There's some ongoing Georgia DOT projects along Donald Lee Hollowell Parkway that, if implemented with certain pieces of recommendations that are being explored currently, that might allow some additional changes to the intersection at James Jackson and Donald Lee Hollowell Parkway, for example. So I know that was a lot of information. I do want to kind of pause and see if folks have some questions. If anybody would like to raise their hand or drop a question in the chat. I'm not seeing any so far, but please feel free to do that. Otherwise, we can talk a little bit about where we go from here.
Do I raise my hand? Hello?
Yes, hi.
Hi, this is Kate Bennett. There's two of us on here. I live in Center Hill. I'm concerned about with the GDOT's plan for lessening the number of lanes on Donnelly Hollowell, and in addition to the new plan proposed tonight about also lessening lanes on Chattahoochee. We already have a major traffic problem during certain times of the day.
Mhm.
And we have traffic problems all over Atlanta. We're known nationally for traffic problems.
Of course.
So have you guys looked into how much worse traffic is going to be or how it's going to be affected at all?
We have kind of done that analysis, and that's part of what goes into some of the work behind the scenes for all of these types of projects. And really, at the end of the day, it's a balancing act. If we only focus on throughput of vehicles and getting more and more cars through to reduce congestion and lessen some of the traffic, there's also the possibility of having some negative impacts to pedestrians and cyclists and other types of people that might be moving through those areas. And so what we try to strive to do is kind of find that balance between where it may restrict some of the traffic and it may reduce the number of lanes. In the case of the recommendation on Chattahoochee Avenue, for example, going from 4 to 3 lanes, it's been shown that a lot of times when there's those 2 inside lanes, people don't even use them as much because they anticipate people will make left turns from those lanes and they'll get stuck behind them. So actually, by providing 1 lane in each direction with a center turn lane, it not only improves safety by giving people the ability to move out of the way for those turning vehicles, but it gets better utilization of that through lane that allows those vehicles to continue moving through. So there's really generally not a significant decrease in mobility or the level of service by going from 4 to 3 lanes on a road like that. But
So
it really is, all part of a balancing act and trying to understand, who's using those roads. And overall, we definitely are thinking about that and trying to, come up with recommendations that would, benefit everybody.
So by not significant decrease, do you mean like a 10% and like traffic would be 10% worse, or it would be 20% worse, or what does not significant mean?
It really depends on each individual segment of road that you're looking at. I don't have a percentage increase or decrease that we could speak to that's from the analysis, but that's kind of it has been looked at in a number of ways, and that's actually one of the Federal Highway Administration's proven safety countermeasures is to do kind of that lane reduction from 4 to 3 lanes. And there's been, proven benefits in terms of reducing the number of crashes quite significantly. So it would have to be, kind of evaluated on a case-by-case basis, and I don't have those direct percentages available right now.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Nick Wolfkale.
Hi, Nick. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, likewise. I'm really, really disappointed to see that you've elected to leave the segment of Howell Mill between Chattahoochee and I-75 as a truck corridor. And I'll tell you why. If you looked at your map, 160 years ago, there'd only be a few roads on it, and 2 of them would be Howell Mill and Collier Road. Howell Mill has evolved over the years. A generation or 2 ago, it was a part of the Berkeley Park and Underwood Hills neighborhoods. There's still, some remaining sort of blue collar homes that are still on the street, serving as businesses. But, due to generations of neglect by city planners, the city in general, the part of Howell Mill I'm talking about it's brain dead. Between Collier Road and the reservoirs on Howell Mill, it's about 1.5 miles, and there's 19 places to get your car fixed, and there's 11 fast food restaurants, and nobody in our neighborhoods ever voted to turn our, the main street through our neighborhood into a place for everyone else in Atlanta to eat lunch and get their car fixed. And the reason it's happened is because of the trucks. It's no place for a human being to want to be. It's no place for a business to want to be. It could be like Candler Park or East Atlanta or Decatur. It doesn't have to be the way it is, but it'll never change as long as those tractor trailers are coming through there. And if you go out there and watch, there's container trucks, there are rock trucks cutting through there. The rock trucks are going to the ready mix plants on Marietta. They could just as easily come and go from 285. That's what they're supposed to do. It's just a convenient shortcut. We're seeing a once in a century transition to the west side of Atlanta. And the reason that the south end of Howell Mill has changed for the positive is because there's not many trucks down there anyway. There's no reason for trucks to be down there. I'm talking about tractor trailers. And the new apartments that have gone in down there, there's street trees, sidewalks, street lights, nice places to be. There's, like I said, the stretch of Howell Mill I'm talking about is just a scar in the middle of our neighborhood. And it'll never change as long as we let tractor trailers use it for a shortcut.
I hear that, and I appreciate that concern. Definitely taking notes on that, and something that our team can go back and take another look at. In part, that was included there because of access to I-75 and being able to, we recognize that the city is undertaking the complete street project on Howell Mill, but also need to be able to think about making sure that the trucks have access to the interstate highways in the area. So we can definitely take a look at that, and Nate and I and the team can kind of reconsider and see what we might be able to do about that. But that was in large part, that segment was to be able to provide that access between 75 through to Chattahoochee, so that there was that direct access without having to go all the way around to get to north side and then back up to the highway.
I understand. I still disagree. I think
hear that.
The Chattahoochee industrial area is rapidly changing too. I'm not sure what industry is left. I mean, there's lots of warehousing, and there's more and more residential and retail, and I just think it's a bad idea. Everything else you've done, I like, though.
Well, thank you, and we appreciate you taking the time to express that concern. And like I said, we'll take a look and see what we might be able to come to some agreement on that.
Thanks.
I see a couple of comments in the chat, and I'll just, for those that might be on their phones or not have access to that, I do want to just kind of mention that. In addition to Nick's comment, there's a comment here that talks about the intersection of Bolton at Marietta Boulevard being highlighted, and that there are plans to open a Starbucks and a drive-through in the northwest corner where, sorry, there was another chat, so it moved. Where the old liquor store, which is currently an entrance on Bolton Road close to the intersection, and would the intersection be able to handle those types of improvements, or that changes rather? And we didn't, I think at the time that we did our analysis, that proposal was not necessarily on the table, although we did look at the operations of those intersections and changes to the configuration of the intersection with anticipated kind of general background growth, anticipated, additional population and traffic in the area up to 10 years in the future. So I assume that some of that would be reflected and accommodated through that general increase. But I'm not sure that specific development was looked at, although in general, we do take into consideration just that assumed additional growth and development in the vicinity of an intersection.
That was my question. And I guess my main concern isn't so much development, it's that it's going to include a drive-through. So it would only take a few cars to cause a
Sure.
backup right there?
Sure. I would also add that with each of these recommendations, there's more work that needs to be done before they become implemented, right? Before they get funded and designed. And so rest assured that as these projects move forward and are designed, if they are advanced that way, that the team that's looking at the design improvements and the new configuration of that would go back and look at those things that have come online. You know, the addition of a drive-through in that location would certainly be part of their consideration as they design what that new intersection would look like. So it's always an evolving process, and there's always new things happening. But at the time that that project is moved forward, they would be looking at those kinds of things. If there's been a permit that's been applied for, or a new zoning for, a nearby property, they would have to take that into consideration.
Thank you. I think the rest of the questions in the chat were also mine. I'll just
Okay.
go ahead and ask them.
Sure.
Okay, so I read the draft that was on the website, and one of the projects was suggested was widening on Bolton Road to include a turning lane.
Mhm.
Just maybe that would be something that goes in the design phase. Is how would that affect speeds? Because now there's a little more space.
Sure.
How would we control speed in that area?
That's a great question. There's a few things that can be done that can help kind of control traffic speed through a road like that. A part of it has to do with the actual design of the roadway itself, and whether there are medians or raised pedestrian islands, for example. Just having those kind of raised features in the roadway helps kind of visually calm traffic, and it does, make it feel a little bit narrower. And so drivers do drive a bit more slowly through those types of, features where you have those areas. There are, excuse me, the lanes would be narrower in that configuration. So right now they're much wider, and in order to fit that new design, the width of the lane would be narrowed down, which would also help kind of encourage drivers to drive at a slower speed. There are a few other things that could be done. It's definitely an important consideration. And again, that would kind of be handled if and when that project is advanced and kind of moved forward through that process.
Oh, thank you.
Sure.
And I believe my next question was, how can residents get these projects prioritized?
That's a great question. I will ask Nate to kind of weigh in on that. I would say from my perspective, the best thing to do as an Atlanta resident myself is to talk to your council member. And Dustin Hillis is on the call tonight. He's been very involved in the process from the get-go. So if there are things that you would like to see moved forward, I would definitely share your opinions with him. Work through your neighborhood planning unit. That's another great way to express your concerns and or your enthusiasm for some of the recommendations here. But I guess I'd open it to Nate or anybody else from the city to chime in on that.
Well, I completely agree. Also, as an Atlanta resident, working, coordinating with your MPU and your council person is the best way to get these things prioritized. And again, I reiterate Aaron's point here that Councilmember Hillis has been a great supporter, and he's read every page. He's provided really insightful comments on the recommendations. So, he's definitely has his eye on the priorities here too. And I think he's still on. And if he wants to.
He just responded to a comment actually related to the Bolton Road widening and speed concerns, saying that the current travel lanes on Bolton are 13 feet wide, and newer lanes on that road would be a maximum of 11 feet done through the design.
And also, we're the Department of City Planning. We have colleagues in other departments, specifically Atlanta Department of Transportation. Mm-hmm. They also have a lot of work going on prioritizing projects, infrastructure, using our bond money, prioritizing that money. They had just recently, Atlanta Department of Transportation recently kicked off their Vision Zero campaign, and I want to drop their Vision Zero project website in the chat. It is a great website. It just launched last week. It has a really nice interactive map that you can kind of show areas in your neighborhood where you feel unsafe, that there's missing sidewalks and other things like that. So I think there's another avenue after this study, there's always going to be an avenue for people to give their input and help prioritize these projects. And so I'll drop that in the chat. It's a great project website.
Councilmember Hillis, I saw you pop on the screen a minute ago. Do you want to weigh in here?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I was having audio issues earlier and was also trying to get my kids in the house. But I want to thank everyone that joined, and I did provide some feedback. Thanks everyone for the questions. But yeah, you've already covered a lot of the Bolton Road stuff that Ms. Foon asked. And that's kind of the Bolton Road project is kind of a older project. I actually tried to get that project funded in the last T-SPOS and Renew bonds that we did back under the previous administration, but wasn't able to get those in there. So we're looking for additional funding. So much what I typed and was responded to verbally, is the case. The travel lanes on Bolton would be more narrow. I'm actually trying to get that done as like a stopgap measure. We're going to be resurfacing Bolton hopefully this summer. So the 2 to 3 lane conversions probably further out. But Bolton is about to fall apart. So when they resurface Bolton, I've asked if they bring those fog lines in to make it more to make it closer to its actual 35-mile-per-hour speed limit, but the same would be done when they did the 3 lane conversion, and it would be a complete street that would also contain, bike lanes and wider sidewalks and/or a multi-use path. The only caveat to that is there'll be the Chattahoochee Riverlands Trail will run very close parallel to Bolton, so that'll have some capacity there. But yeah, I did want to, and I think I did, I don't know if Nate can speak to this, but I think I did put the feedback about the new Starbucks development. And I've talked about that with Commissioner Cavaness and others. That's going to be a big concern. If the complete streets 2 to 3 lane conversion is further out, there's definitely going to be a need to expand the turning lanes going eastbound onto Bolton, because their entrance on Bolton is going to be a free-for-all, because you're going to be able to turn right, left, in and out there. And it's not where it opens up into the turning lanes. It's actually going to be on the 2-lane portion. And then its entrance on Marietta Boulevard, just by the fact that there's a concrete median in the middle of that portion of Marietta Boulevard, is effectively going to be a right in, right out. So I think my feedback brought up that fact that Starbucks I think they have received their land disturbance permit and are in permitting for the actual building now. So we'll definitely need that to be taken into consideration, because that'll definitely attract many of the 17,000 cars per day that Bolton sees and the 25,000 cars per day that portion of Marietta sees. And that's one of the, I think, 2 worst rated intersections, where I think Marietta Boulevard and Bolton, and then West Marietta and Marietta Boulevard. So I definitely have asked for them to take a second look at the recommendations for both those intersections.
Thank you. Appreciate your guidance and participation and your feedback on those. I think I'm looking through the chat, and it seems like many of the comments have been addressed. There was a question about the multi-use path and or bike accommodations along Bolton Road, which Councilmember Hillis just addressed. There's a couple of different options for that. Ultimately, that would be decided through that kind of design and implementation phase, and may depend on the timing of it as it relates to Chattahoochee Riverlands and some of the other projects in the area. But with Bolton as a bike route, it will be important to provide space for bicyclists, whether that's on street or separated behind the curb in the form of a multi-use path is kind of to be determined. But definitely that's an important consideration along that road. Let me just kind of briefly talk through some next steps. Nate, there's also a question in there from Nick about coordination and presentations to NPUs. Maybe you want to try to address that.
Yeah, we've been updating. So this study area touches 12 NPUs. Some of the NPUs just have one street or a few parcels, but the main NPU, NPUD, NPUG have been updated. The part of our study advisory group, all 12 NPU chairs were notified of this meeting and the public review and comment period. And we'll probably give them another reminder before March 15th. But the intent here is just much like our other traffic studies and small area plans. We'll have a discussion at the NPU body, one of their monthly meetings coming up here, probably April, May, and ask for their support for the adoption of this plan. So again, we have to coordinate with 12 NPUs, but there's the core NPUs D and G in particular, and a few others. So we've definitely been communicating with them throughout.
So just briefly then, I did want to kind of bring everybody's attention back to the screen and kind of, excuse me, the website, freightatl.com. It sounds like many of you have already been there and visited the site and taken a look at the reports. I will say that some of these other reports that kind of precede the recommendations report are, full of lots of information. It may provide a little bit more of the detail that you might be looking for when it comes to some of the recommendations. So I'm not saying you need to read all of them or every page, but it is helpful to kind of skim them and recognize that they all sort of build on one another and they're all feeding into the recommendations report. So there's information from each of those preceding reports that kind of inform where we are today with the draft recommendations. So please do go and check those out if you haven't done that already. Take a look and share your thoughts and feedback. You can use the comment form that's built right into the freightatl.com website, or you can also send us an email. It's pretty simple, freightatl@atlantaga.gov. So we do appreciate your all's participation and feedback. We are going to continue to revise our reports and recommendations based on the comments received via email and in writing, as well as the comments that we've discussed tonight. So we'll take a look back at what we might need to do to kind of update and revise and make some changes, and then we'll be kind of continuing to coordinate, as Nate mentioned, with the NPUs. And we do have the comment period open through the middle of March. And then we'll be kind of updating the project website with the final versions of the report and recommendations as they are agreed upon. And then, kind of moving into the late spring and early summer, the city will be kind of working its way through sort of the approval process and looking to get the plan adopted. Nate, is there anything else you want to add on next steps as we approach 7 o'clock?
No, just again, thank you everyone for participating. Again, feel free to provide any comments through the website, direct email, or even call me.
We appreciate everybody's attending tonight. I know it's been a busy week for a lot of us, so I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us and learn a little bit about this plan and share your feedback and thoughts, especially to those of you who've been with us through the whole course of the study. We do really appreciate your participation and guidance. And hopefully you find something of value and exciting and interesting and beneficial to your communities in this plan. And we hope to see some of these projects move forward in the near future. With that, I think we'll go ahead and conclude. I'm showing 6:58, unless anybody has any final comments or questions.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks all. Take care.